Welcome back to the club. How far ahead is Alibaba's technology when it comes to banking? Will banks in the UK, US, and Australia be able to catch up? We'll speak to Anthony Thomson, the builder of banks, and Chris Skinner, the global financial expert, on whether or not they can catch up. And so, Chris, I'm interested in around the world. You know, you travel around the world a lot. Looking at say UK, Asia, Europe, around the world.
Everywhere.
Yeah, and I'm interested in, firstly, can you tell us what's the market dynamic you're seeing that's different between those different countries?
Well, it's intriguing from my side in that I actually run a number of networking groups across Europe, as well as being involved heavily in a lot of groups around the world. And the thing that I keep coming back to is, if I look at Australia or Europe or America, nearly all of the infrastructure that we use was implemented before Mark Zuckerberg was conceived. And we're trying to change that infrastructure to deal with 21st century demands of a networked economy. And yet, if you look at China, India, Africa, or Central South America, they didn't have that infrastructure because it was markets that were not as consumer oriented, as funded, as mature, or invested in as Europe, America, and Australia. And so those markets are actually leapfrogging the legacy markets. So Europe is a legacy economy in many of the countries of Europe. Same with America. I mean, America is still heavily dependent on checks and magstripe cards. They're just getting to chip and pins a day. And yet China's leapfrogged all that. So it's all QR code payments. And now they're exporting their capabilities into other economies. So if you look at Paytm in India, which is one of the biggest mobile wallets for payments and banking services in India, it's all powered by Alipay from China. And then branded locally. And the same in Indonesia, Philippines, other markets. So the dynamics I'm seeing happening is that you've got what we call FinTech, which is doing old banking cheaper, faster, and better with technology. And yet China is talking about tech fin, which is taking tech first and trying to do completely different new financial services using technology. And those two ideas eventually will merge, but right now, I'm looking at China and Africa and Central South America and Asia as the markets that really are hot.
Well, you can summarise the problem and the opportunity really simply. People around the world, whatever country they're based in, say, I live most of my life on this device. Why can't I manage all of my money on this device? And that's, I think, is the challenge that banking faces, and the real opportunity that new entrants like 86400 have.
Yep. And what I want to talk about is, you talked a lot about there are these niches that a new bank can go after and start. I'm interested from both of you talk about maybe your favorite or most promising or interesting niche bank you're seeing around the world, or that you look at and like, I can imagine AT for yourself, you'd be like, well, let's, in meetings day to day, you're like, look at that over there. Maybe Chris, you can talk about that as well. Do you want to start, AT?
Yeah, I think if we go back to saying this is the key to people's relationships with their money going forward, then everything depends upon the transaction account. So how do you, because that's where you interact with your money most regularly, and people will be looking at their devices 10 times a day to see how much money they have. Most people's money doesn't last till the end of the month. So they're worried, have I got enough to pay for this pair of shoes, that coffee, that meal, or whatever. So they want to know. The things that really excite me, and it's not in a single company, I've seen it in all sorts of places, and it's the kind of thing that we're doing, is you go, how can I use big data and data analytics and artificial intelligence, not just to tell you what happened with your money, because that's what banks tend to do. They say, here's your statement. That's what happened with your money last month. We want to send you next month's bank statement. We want to say, we can use these technologies, an increasingly understanding of your behavior with your permission, to say, we know next month, Fred, you're going to buy a new car because this is what you do every April or every second April, and we know you have your kids' school fees, and we know you've got other things, we know what your income is, there's going to be a shortfall. We go, Fred, we think this is what's going to happen. You're going to be $3,000 short would you like a $3,000 facility? So it's this ability to anticipate and predict what customers need, which I think is really exciting. At Atom, we used to call it telepathic banking. And it's what I think is the future of banking and what we hope to bring into the market here.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'd rather have telepathic than psychopathic banking.
Psychopathic bankers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Aim to kill you, which is what we found from the Royal Commission investigation. I'm writing a lot. As you say, I'm sort of producing books, and I blog every single day. And in my blogging and writing, I have a lot of case studies about interesting startups and banks and FinTech companies. But in Digital Human, I ended up dedicating a third of the book to a case study about Alipay and Ant Financial from China. And I did that because they're a company that's going global and looking at getting 2 billion users doing 1 million transactions per second. And I thought, well, A, where are all those users coming from? Because there's not that many people in China. But B, 1 million transactions a second is phenomenal. You know, how are they going to do this? And so when you ask me, you know, what's of interest, I think the vision and the innovation of the big Chinese tech giants, because Alipay and Financial spun off from Alibaba. And Alibaba, Tencent and Baidu are the 3 biggest internet giants in China. And the problem that a lot of people, in my view, have is that they go and look at Google, Amazon and Facebook and they don't look at Tencent, Alibaba and Baidu. In fact, a lot of people say to me, what's Baidu? And I go, it's the Google of China, don't you know? And they go, never heard of them. And in particular with Alipay, what amazed me is I met the guy who runs their systems architecture. And I'm talking to him, and halfway through he says, "Oh, we're on our 5th generation systems architecture." I said, "Well, what's that? You know, what do you mean 5th generation systems architecture?" He said, "Oh, we throw our systems away every 3 or 4 years and start again." I'm like, "Really?" Because I don't know any other company that thinks that way. And then he explained why, and they went through iterations. They started with an escrow service in 2003, and then a payment service in 2007, which is the 2nd generation, using various providers from the US. Then they found the US providers couldn't scale to the level of operations they wanted, so they created their own using Alibaba Cloud, which is 3rd generation. Then they realized that the 3rd generation didn't have the ability to do the risk management metrics that they wanted, so they built a 4th generation architecture with artificial intelligence to manage the risk on every transaction. And this 4th generation architecture is illustrated really well by what happened in Singles Day, November 2018. So, you know, this blows my mind. Singles Day 2018, they processed over $30 billion of revenues in 24 hours on Alibaba's platform using Alipay, an average 256,000 transactions a second, which, you know, Visa globally does about 2,000. So, you know, 100 times more than Visa globally processes on their platform. They did $1 billion of sales in 90 seconds. You know, $10 million in just over 5 minutes. And every single transaction has artificial intelligence looking at, is this a fraudulent transaction? And sifting out the ones that are suspect versus the ones that are not. And you just think of that scale and that structure and the idea of throwing in systems away every 3 or 4 years. And it's just completely radically different thinking. And there's so much you can learn from what they're doing. And what's amazing as well is that they tell me everything. You know, and if I go to US companies like a Visa or Bank of America, everything's under a non-disclosure agreement. You go to Ant Financial and Alibaba and they say, here it is. Because they know that people can't do it. Because they've done it.